Hey, good afternoon. I'm Ben Kritz, and I'm here with the brains behind Green Tiger Markets, John Knorring and Carlos Korten. Thanks for coming in. It's good to see you guys again. As a little background, I first met John and Carlos about 4 years ago, right? About 4 years ago, when they were beginning the journey to develop the electricity forwards market platform that's available here in the Philippines. And I understand you guys are meeting with all kinds of success and have had some new developments now. So how's it going?
You want to start, John?
What's the latest?
First of all, thanks so much for having us. We really do appreciate it. It's great to see you again in person. I remember our first meeting back in February of 2020 in these offices.
Little did we know that the world was going to change shortly after that.
Yeah, I mean, Carlos and I were basically the last flight out of here. And, you know, we came away with like a really high level of optimism about the Philippines and just the growth story. And just, you know, like people were great. This is a market where, hey, they could really benefit from some of the skills that basically Carlos and I had picked up in our professions earlier. And, you know, of course, the pandemic hit. And for the first kind of 4 or 5 months, you know, from kind of March of 2020 onwards, you know, Carlos and I, we learned how to Zoom, and we were writing user stories and doing wireframes for the platform to get it up. But basically, you know, real quick, Green Tiger Markets is a platform where both generators of electricity and consumers of electricity can go to hedge or lock in the price either that they're going to pay or receive for power in the forward market. And so, you know, this is a concept that is widely accepted in the U.S. We've got lots of these markets, and but we saw, hey, there was an opportunity here in the Philippines to basically bring some of that technology and some of that expertise to help you know, support the electricity market here.
And Ben, you know this as well as anyone, but the Philippines has every kind of energy technology, right? And it's hydro, there's solar, there's coal, there's natural gas, there's wind, there's biomass, and they all have different economics, and they all have different price exposure to risk. The spot market, the Western spot market, is very volatile in terms of prices. And any company that's exposed to the price, either if they're selling to the spot market or if they're buying from the spot market, they're just going to take whatever the price happens to be. And that results in a wild fluctuations in price, which results in things like price shock. And consumers will feel price shock. And that is part of what makes our platform so timely for the Philippines, is you can put financial hedges in place against spot prices in wholesale electricity and lock in for a forward term for a year, a month, many years, and lock in a price that is fair and even, and then know that that is guaranteed. So that a lot of the wildness in the spot market is insulated.
Yeah, okay, let's back up a second here, because I get this question all the time, every time I mention this. So as simply as we can explain it, you know, exactly what are, you know, suppliers and buyers of electricity doing in a forwards market? What exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so if you are a supplier or a generator, you have power to deliver to the market. And so if the market price is very high, you benefit, and if it's low, you benefit, you know, a lot less. And so the generator or the supplier is generally a seller into the market, and that way they can lock in today, they can get a guaranteed price for their supply. Now on the flip side, the consumers, they are exposed where, hey, if the spot market is very high, they get a problem. You know, it costs them a lot more for their power. And if the spot market is very low, that's a big benefit. You know, we saw prices during the pandemic, you know, in kind of March, April, May, sometimes the power is free. And even there were some hours where it was negative price, where they were paying you to take the electricity. So but very simply, a consumer, hey, they're going into the forward market and they're looking to hedge by buying. And a supplier is going into the forward market and looking to sell.
And important is that sellers, what they worry about every night when they go to bed is that the price will drop, or drop or go negative. And buyers are really worried that it's gonna peak. And so our contracts are designed so that buyers and sellers can mutually agree on a price and indemnify each other against the volatility. So if John's a generator and I'm a buyer, we can agree that, hey, for 10 megawatts, you're going to protect me against spikes, and I'm going to protect you against a drop.
Right. Yeah. Now, this by itself, the forwards trade, doesn't really necessarily reduce the power rates that we all pay. But how does it help for consumers?
Yeah, so it doesn't necessarily today reduce the price that you see on your bill. However, what it does do is it makes it easier for both generators and consumers to lock in a price so that they have certainty. And if you're thinking about, hey, I've got this really volatile cash flow or stock or asset, hey, sometimes it's really good, sometimes it's really bad, or I've got this other one that it's the same amount every single day, that consistent same amount every day asset or power plant or stock, whatever it is a lot more valuable than the one that's bouncing around a lot. And so that certainty and that kind of guarantee of those straight cash flows makes it so that the market as a whole has to charge less of a risk premium into the price. So there's a big portion of the Wesson price right now that we refer to as risk premium.
Right.
And that's because, hey, it might be high, it might be low. If I'm a generator, I need to get kind of a little extra compensated because it's really volatile. And the same as, and basically that gets passed through to the consumer. And so over time, because less risk premium is demanded by the generators, the price will tend to drift lower. But in the meantime, that idea of, hey, if you're locking in a price and it's the same price that you're paying every month versus what we saw this year, the first 3 months of the year were very, very cheap. Then the next 3 months were very, very expensive. Obviously, there's a big difference in weather and rain, and but if you're a consumer and you say, oh man, my price was 7 pesos in January, February, and March, and then April you wake up and it's 11 pesos.
Right.
That's a problem. But that comes from the fact that basically the DUs and the ECs aren't hedging enough. They aren't spreading that risk and locking in today.
Yeah, well, okay. Well, here's an example, I guess, that people could actually relate to, because this has been in the news, fairly recently. But Meralco's rates, where they ran into the problem with the fuel got so much more expensive because of the Ukraine war. So I was telling you yesterday when we spoke, if you look at their applications for power supply agreements, they actually, in their calculations, they actually calculate, well, here's some slack, in case the price goes up or down a lot. And so with the forwards market, they no longer have to add that part in their calculations, which instantly becomes that disappearing off of our bills.
Yeah. In the supply chain, it really helps if there's certainty, and the economics are locked in and smooth. Even if electricity is going to get more expensive just because the economy is growing and there's more demand, that can be done in a smooth, over time manner as opposed to volatile and spiky. And to the positive, if there's a lot of new generation that comes in that would drive prices down on a forward, that would also be smoothed out, but you would be able to see it in a gradual kind over time. And one of the points of a forward market is we have price signals to say, oh, there's a trade that just happened for 2026 electricity, and it was at a certain price point. And then we make that price available to the market so that everyone knows, hey, electricity just traded in 2026 at this price. And that becomes an indicator for investors who may be looking to buy generation, or electricity cooperatives that are trying to lock in their supply for future years. Like, where is the price of electricity on a forward basis, so that they can be more planful and more efficient in their capital utilization.
Now, if you can share, I know some of this is probably confidential information, but how much have you guys grown? How many customers have you got? How many deals have you got? And I understand you've also just recently had a kind of a noteworthy one. So if you guys want to talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah, sure. So on the client front, we're signing clients up kind of every week right now. The measure that we like to look at is, okay, if you're a generator and you signed up and you've got 2,000 megawatts of generation, we put that on the generator side. And if you're a consumer and you're a res and you've got 1,000 megawatts or whatever it is, we sort of add that up. And I think we're up to about 14 or 15,000 megawatts of generation that has signed up out of, call it, 25,000 to 28,000 nameplate installed capacity.
Right.
So
it's about 28,000.
Yeah. So roughly half of the generation stack has signed up, and we're running about a third on the consumption side. So so if you add up all the consumers that are generally on the buy side, it works out to about a third of the consumption stack here. So which is really exciting. I mean, it's been a challenge. Obviously we started during the pandemic, and sort of getting the ball rolling took some time, but we did our first transaction early last year, and it just seems like I grew up in Chicago, so to say that it's snowballing, so maybe not appropriate, but it's picking up steam, and I'm glad you brought up the significant transaction. So it was really exciting on Friday. One of the innovations that we came up with during the pandemic, as we saw the push from the Philippines government to add more RE to the mix, was the contracts that were available for the solar generators didn't match the risk that they had. So, most of the contracts were a baseload or a 24/7 contract. So if you're a solar generator and you sold one of these baseload contracts, you had to deliver power every hour. Right. But your generating facility only produced it basically between the hours of 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. So there was a lot of extra risk that the generators were actually taking on by hedging that way. So what we did was we said, hey, there's a solution here, which is, one, what if the contracts only referenced 8 a.m. to 4 p.m.? Now, that's great for the solar generators, but a market can only function if there's both a buyer and a seller. Well, it turns out that, no surprise, during the middle of the day is the peak demand. So, so we've seen a lot of these retail electricity suppliers that come in and say, hey, I need to buy power from the middle of the day. That's, people are flipping on their air conditionings, the elevators are running, all kinds of different uses for the electricity. So they've got the buy exposure, and the solar guys have the sell exposure. And so we created this product, with that in mind. And actually, we just executed our first transaction on Friday. So we had a generator sell all of 2025, so every month of 2025 from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. And then on the buy side, we had a retail electricity supplier. So they both, locked in their price today for power for the next, starting in January, for the next 12 months.
I think the important innovation here is these contracts that John's describing. The baseload contract exists in the U.S. market, it exists in Japan, it exists in Europe, and now on our platform it exists in the Philippines. What's new is the construct that John was describing, the 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., which is uniquely suitable for solar and renewable energy. And that's something that when we look around the world in terms of innovation, that structure hasn't been brought to market before. So the trade that happened late last week was the first time the midday power sold as a standalone product.
So not only the first here in the Philippines, but possibly
the first
We
one.
believe-
So far as we
believe
know.
it's novel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so far as we know, it's the
that's
first midday
that's something.
contract.
And the importance of that is, of course, the solar electricity is generally much cheaper than
And there's going to be a lot of it.
Yeah,
produced by coal plant, and especially at that time of the day when demand is high, because of course that makes the price go up. So now at the time of the day when power would ordinarily be more expensive, the retail electric supplier has now gotten a good deal on it,
Yes.
so that their customers will benefit from lower rates that way.
That's right. And so it turns out that in terms of the price that actually transacted, it's about 10% cheaper than we're seeing for the around-the-clock power strip. So the retail electricity supplier, during his peak demand, is getting power cheaper than kind of the average price of the day. So now we've got a seller because he wants to lock it in and guarantee his cash flows for next year.
Right.
He wants to be able to go and move on and build another utility scale solar farm. But basically the only way that he can do that is if he basically can hedge his project. So it's both parties seem to be very pleased with the end result, even though the price was a little bit lower for the generator.
Right, but you kind of hinted at another. They want to build some more.
That's right.
And so this is a signal to other investors. The government wants to add more renewable energy and
That's right.
sell off their capacity in the green energy
Yeah.
market, or the auction that they have that they only sold about 30% of the last time. But now an investor that's interested can look and say, okay, I can do this, and I know that I will get a consistent price for an extended period of time, so now it's worth it.
Yeah.
And so
That's
they
an
come in.
important point. There are a lot of solar developers that are looking to secure their financing to put utility scale
Right.
solar in place. And one of the things that the underwriters really need is certainty in future revenues.
Yeah, that's always been the challenge, especially for solar, I think, is that they can't get financing, unless they're going to have guaranteed revenue, and they can't guarantee the revenue unless they build the thing. So
That's right.
They're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah,
So
it's a big chicken and egg problem, but it is solvable. I mean, if you look at electricity markets, either in the U.S. or Europe or Australia, they provide that price signal to the market. And right now, the Philippines is flashing, I guess, green, saying, "Hey, the price is really good here." And we like to sort of use the example that, if the price is high, that sends a signal to the market that, hey, you should produce more of this good. And if the price is low, it sends a signal to the market that you should consume more of this good. But if you don't know what the price is, how do you make a decision on to
Right.
produce more or consume more? And so now that there's an actual market traded price for this power, it's sending a signal all over the world right now saying, and trust me, we're telling people all around that, hey, here's the price that it's transacting.
Yeah.
And solar developers around the world are eyeing the Philippines now.
And it's probably a good moment for the country, because there's other places like the U.S. and Australia where the environment is a little bit tricky for investors, or they're becoming not so favorable.
Yeah.
What kind of two questions. First of all, how hard was it to get that first trade?
It was easy. It was easy.
I know you've
hindsight,
told me
it was
this story,
easy,
but
so.
just to give people a taste of how things work here. How difficult was it to get the first buyer and seller to jump? And what other kind of challenges have you guys encountered as far as pushback from regulators or skepticism within the industry, because I know it's been 4 years, and I know it's not been an easy road the whole time.
I mean, the pandemic obviously was a challenge. We weren't able to come over here and be here in person, and I would say that single factor was probably the most important to going from 0 to 1, was being able to come here in person to meet the clients. Yeah, Zoom's great. Once you had a few in-person meetings, hey, Zoom's all you need. So you can avoid the traffic situation. So, we came over in January of 23, and it took a couple months for a few of the players to kind of get organized, say, okay, you know what, we really want to do this. And so we had our first client sign up in March, I believe, of last year. And then we had 2 or 3 more come in over the next few months. They were all sellers. And then we had a client sign up as a buyer. And so obviously in a market, you need a buyer and a seller. If you just have sellers, it doesn't work. So it took a little while to find a buyer. But once we found that buyer, the market very quickly firmed up in terms of, hey, what was kind of the price that was going to trade. And we got the transaction done. Our first trade was August to December around the clock power. And I think the price was 5,900 pesos per megawatt hour, so 5.9 per kW. It was a challenge. Now a lot of it is, hey, we send documents, they send documents. We kind of go back and forth, and just the time change is it does present a challenge. So I got to get up pretty early in the morning to have a business hours meeting here. So
one thing that John's talking about in terms of being here in person is that trust is so important, especially for an early stage company. Nobody knows what Green Tiger Markets is. So to build those relationships in an industry, it's established industry with established players, it really helped for us to be present and attentive and responsive. And face-to-face really helped with that in our early days. Our product and the market construct itself is novel for the Philippines. And novelty is a challenge, just in general, because it's not the way companies have operated in the past. Most of them haven't done a contract for difference in the past. They have different orientations or mindset around spot exposure and what is risk to them. And so we've spent a lot of time, and we continue to spend a lot of time teaching. A lot of it is about how does commodities work, and what is a financial hedge, and how is that different from a PSA, and how does the legal construct work, and how does settlement work, and the mechanics of these contracts. Because there isn't a lot of precedent, and we spend a lot of time with companies meeting with their accountants and meeting with their lawyers and talking about compliance. And talking about being good citizens and things like that. And that is a process that takes a long time. But where we are now, I think we have really good relationships with the participants we have on place, which is like half the generators and about a third of the distribution. And that is paying dividends now. And what we're seeing as a proof point is, for the first time this year, we have inbounds coming to us, where we have independent power producers that we haven't discovered, that are discovering us and saying, oh, I need replacement power. And I was shopping around, and someone said, oh, you should think about Green Tiger. And then they sent an inbound to us, and we're like, oh, how have we not met before this? And that's a new thing now, and we use those types of proof points just as a measure of our progress, right? So.
I think one of the other exciting inbounds was the electricity cooperative that called and said, hey, we heard about this Green Tiger Markets. Our power prices are all over the gym. And what can you do to help? And so that is an ongoing discussion right now. But I'm confident that our products, whether it's an electricity cooperative or a DU or a res, it's the same. It's a level playing field for everybody. So, so to allow the the EC's access to this hedging market, we believe, is really important for the growth and stability of the electricity market here.
Yeah. I think, we started out targeting a lot of the big players in energy. And one of the things we're doing now is reaching out to the middle market and the long tail. So smaller generators, electricity cooperatives in rural areas. And it's a very different problem for them because the big players know exactly what the price of electricity is at any given time. They have a giant phone book of companies to call and consumers. The smaller power producers don't have those types of sales resources. And a marketplace like ours that gives them price transparency on a forward basis and access to lots of buyers and sellers is a real game changer for them. And then the same thing on the EC side. Some of the electricity cooperatives we're looking at take 70 or 80% of their power from spot, unhedged.
Right.
And so sometimes they're paying 2,000 pesos per megawatt, and sometimes it's 13 or 15, and it could be anywhere in between, and they're trying to manage that for their customers and show a fixed price. It's a very, very problematic situation for them. And for them to use our platform to lock in and say, I'm going to find someone that's going to sell me power for 5.5 per kilowatt, that's a great price. And then they know that they can offer, they'll put in their margins, and then they can offer that price for, for the duration of their hedge. And that'll go a long way to solving price shock.
That just gave me a thought. Have you had any discussions with the National Electrification Administration?
Not yet. They're on our list. I'm here for another week to 10 days.
That is right. Something in their wheelhouse is helping these cooperatives be, a little more financially stable, and that's obviously a big part of it.
Yeah, I think, Ben, it's fair to say that we're discovering the best way to reach out to the industry. On the generation side, on the distribution side, there are a lot of industry groups that help solar developers get financing. So we're trying to talk to them and help familiarize them with financial hedging. And then spending time with the regulators, with the DOE and with the ERC to make sure that they understand what we're doing in the market and how we can help, and familiarizing them because they get a lot of inbound calls about us to say, what are these Green Tiger guys doing?
What has been the feedback from the DOE and the ERC? I mean, are they supportive of this, or are they like, hey, it's fine, but
we're solving a lot of problems that are important for them, right?
Okay.
But I will say that again, to the point that its novelty is very unsettling, and the regulators don't have an established rule book for how to handle a marketplace like ours.
Right.
So they're trying to put fair guardrails in place without removing competition and without stifling the private sector. So I think from their perspective, they're doing a lot of learning. We're doing a lot of outreach to make sure that they're familiar and they have the information that they need to help that conversation go forward. But I would describe their participation as supportive.
Yep.
And maybe attentive is maybe the better adjective, which is they're attentive, they're maybe cautiously optimistic. But again, there's so much that's new. And as regulators, I think they're trying to find their right role. So,
yeah, I mean, I think we're having very productive conversations with both the DOE and the ERC. Now, ultimately, our regulator is actually the Monetary Authority of Singapore because we are a Singapore-based company, and we fit into their regulatory framework just fine. And so, it does sort of present a bit of a challenge when you have another regulator looking at, a company that sits under somebody else's purview. So, but ultimately, we're here to help bring transparency and price discovery and liquidity to the Philippines electricity market. And yeah, we'd absolutely like to work, constructively with the industry and basically all of the stakeholders because it matters. I mean, you've got some very expensive electricity here. And it doesn't need to be that way. And just because the price of electricity goes down a little bit doesn't mean that the generator's profitability goes down. So that's one thing
Right.
to keep in mind. And that goes back to that certainty argument. So if you're guaranteed a profit, your stock price is probably going to go up. So but yeah, we're keeping an open dialogue and an open mind.
It helps with the regulators that we didn't invent these products, right? This construct exists in other markets in the world, and so we can reference the experience of the U.S. market, the Australian market,
Right.
and then project that into the Philippines. And the Philippines is a really interesting place for these products to succeed. So, and especially because prices are so high and so volatile, it's like we're exactly the right solution at the right time.
So you've just had your first trade on the new solar product.
Yep.
What's next? What kind of things are you looking at? Looking at beyond that.
Obviously it's rinse and repeat on the products that we've done, already, and that's just kind of the beauty of the way that the technology works. That to do it again is really, really easy to do. Now we've started discussions. So we mentioned we've got about half of the installed capacity of the Philippines market. Now if you know anything about the fuel stack here, it's probably 60 to 70% coal, and then anywhere from 10 to 20% gas. That gas is coming from Malampaya generally, and that's obviously depleting.
For now.
For now, exactly. But there's actually a very large and well-developed market for liquefied natural gas, and there was just the announcement between San Miguel and Aboitiz and Meralco on the LNG import facility that we're working with some of the generators. We're already helping them sell the products that they are producing, the electricity. Now to be able to hedge that exposure, and now we're turning the other direction, saying, hey, can we help you hedge basically your input cost or your fuel cost? And so we're optimistic that we can get our first transaction in LNG done later this year. I feel like we're close. And but yeah, that's probably what's next. And one of the longer term projects, we think it's longer. We're ready to go today on it, but is the renewable energy certificate market. And obviously, this is a market that's been in construction for about 6 years or so here.
We've talked about this several times, and I've also talked to people like Wesson, about the same thing, and that's apparently a challenge for everyone.
Yeah. Now, ultimately, to list that market and have it trade in a transparent manner that's repeatable, for us, that's our core business. We actually already have built the marketplace for renewable energy certificates to trade on a renewable basis, just like we have for electricity, just like we've done for all the other metals markets that we launched before Philippines electricity. And so we've got that up and running. It's just a matter of, hey, can we get everybody to agree that this is how it's going to work? And so that's one of the projects that we're working on. It's going to take a little longer than LNG.
Yeah, the specific role that we imagine for ourselves in REX is the forward market. So there is a described mechanism for to trade the current vintage of REX. Not fully implemented, I'd say, but we could certainly be the market for companies to buy and sell future vintages. Like, for example, if I'm a solar developer, I can sell 10 years worth of REX, and you'd use our platform as the mechanism to find the right price and to actually find a counterparty for that. So we'll see. Like John said, that is probably a long road. Because there are a lot of parties
they haven't
involved.
quite figured out they haven't quite figured out the current. The current edition yet. As I know from talking to the wholesale market guys, and this is a conversation that if we really got into it, there would be one or two government agencies that might look bad. So Maybe we won't get into all that here. We have just a couple of minutes left, but why don't you guys make a little pitch? If any electric cooperatives or RES people are listening in, how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah.
What's the steps that they can take to to look into this?
Yeah, so in terms of getting in touch with us, we obviously have a website, www.greentigermarkets.com. There's a, hey, learn more on the website. But yeah, when it comes to an electricity cooperative or res, we've seen a lot of kind of Facebook posts of people complaining about their electricity cooperatives, that their electric bill more than doubled from February to May. Ultimately, that's a solvable problem, and it's being solved every day on Green Tiger Markets. So we'd love to have you. Don't hesitate to reach out over the website, and we'd absolutely love to have you.
Yeah, all of our rule books and our contracts are listed on the website.
Yep.
And then we also have a series of YouTube videos on how does this work and what is the compliance framework. So there's a lot of self-study material that we mentioned. We do a lot of teaching in terms of this is a new construct, and here's what it means, and here's how it can be applied in the context of different businesses. So if there's interest, that's a good resource as well.
Okay. Well, I think we'll leave it at that. John Knorring, Carlos Korten from Green Tiger Markets. It's great to see you guys again, and thanks for taking a little time out to talk with us. I'm Ben Kritz, and have a good afternoon.